All right, today we covered transversals and angle pairs, so we're going to classify pairs of angles that are formed by two lines and a transversal. Adjacent angles are angles that are next to each other. Officially or formally, to be adjacent, they have to share a vertex. So angle 1 right here and angle 2 share a vertex. So these two angles are known as adjacent. If we said angle 3 here, then we would say angle 2 and angle 3 are adjacent. A linear pair is when two adjacent angles form a line. So first of all, to be a linear pair, they have to be adjacent next to each other. And then they have to form a straight line. So there's the line they form, and that is how they are adjacent because they share the vertex. Now if they form a line, we know that a line adds up to be 180 degrees, so we would say angle 1 and angle 2 would add to be 180 degrees if they are a linear pair. Vertical angles are angles that are formed by two intersecting lines, and they are non-adjacent. So we have this angle here, 1, and angle 2. Now they are not next to each other. I like to say they form an X. So angle 1 and 2 would form that X. If I had angles 3 and 4, 3 and 4 would also be known as vertical angles. The other thing that we can determine about vertical angles is if angle 1 was, say, 150 degrees, angle 2 would also be 150 degrees. So we say that these two angles are congruent because they are exactly the same measure. And we could also say that with angle 3 and 4 on that picture. Complementary angles are two angles that add to be 90 degrees. So if we added these two angles, it would be 90 degrees. Complementary angles do not have to be adjacent. Supplementary angles are two angles that add to be 180. So if we add those angles, it should be 180 degrees. And the big difference between supplementary angles and a linear pair is that a linear pair has to be adjacent. They have to be next to each other, where supplementary angles do not have to be next to each other. Parallel lines, these are lines that are in the same plane that never intersect. And skew lines are lines that never intersect, but they're not in the same lane, or same plane. So I'm going to use the next screen and explain this. So I kind of ignore the transversal part for just a minute. So I think I drew a cube in class today. And I only drew part of it. And we talked about how AB here is parallel to CD, and it's also parallel to EF. So all of these are parallel lines. They're not, and they can be in the same plane. Okay, to not be in the same plane, we talked about CD and EF. Those are not in the same plane, so they would be considered skew. Another pair that we could look at, AC and FB, are not in the same plane and they do not intersect. So they are also known as skew. So, transversal, this is a line that intersects two or more lines. And so if I were to label my lines down here, oops, let me change my pen, A, B, and C, then we would say that C here is the transversal because it intersects both A and B. Now we know that because lines go on forever, A and B will eventually intersect. But because we can actually see C intersecting A and B, then we say that C is the transversal. Interior angles are angles that lie inside the two lines here. So our angles that lie between those two lines, for example 3 and 4 are known as interior angles, as well as 6 and 5 because they are inside those two lines. Exterior angles are angles that lie outside the line. So if we're talking about our lines here, outside those lines instead of in between, outside will lead us to 1 and 2, and 7 and 8. So all of those are known as exterior angles. Alternate interior angles, these are interior, so they're in between these two lines, and they are on opposite, these are keywords, opposite, sometimes I say on alternate sides of the transversal. So here we have 3 and 5, those are known as alternate interiors, as well as 6 and 4. Alternate exterior angles I abbreviated AEA. These are angles that are outside our two lines, and they're also on opposite sides of the transversal, alternating sides of the transversal. So we have 1 and 8, and also 2 and 7. Corresponding angles I abbreviate CA. These are angles that are in the same position on the two lines in relation to the transversal. So same position. I like to say that these form an F, but they don't always look like they form an F, but we can manipulate that letter just a little bit. So important that they're on the same side. So we have 2 and 5, 1 and 6. These are all corresponding angles. 4 and 8, and if you look, you can see my little F kind of right here. So these angles right here are what are corresponding. And 3 and 7. All of those are what are known as corresponding angles. Consecutive interior, these are angles, and I call these CIA. These are angles that are on the same side of the transversal. So the last one, corresponding angles and consecutive, are both lie on the same side. The difference is that these are between the other lines. So 4 and 5 would be known as consecutive interior, as well as 3 and 6. Example 1 asks us to use the figure at the right to name all the planes that intersect plane STX. So we have this plane, and it wants us to label all of the planes that intersect it. I'm first going to talk about the top one because I can see it, and we just need to list it with 3 letters to have a plane, so I'm going to call it QRS. And then another one it intersects is that bottom one. So I'll call it WXY. Another one that it will intersect is the one to the side of it. I'll write it on this other side, TYZ. And then we also have the one to this side of it. And I'll call it RSX. Okay, B says name all the segments that intersect QU. So QU right here, we want to know all the segments that intersect that segment. So we can see QR, first of all. Okay, we also have QV. Then we'll go to the U, QU, and at that vertex here, we have that UZ. And then we also have U2. Sorry, UT. Okay, the last one says name all the segments that are skew to VW. So VW is right back here. To be skew, they can't be in the same plane, so none of these we're talking about. Also, none of those there. So instead, we're talking about something like XS. We can get that TY and UZ. Okay, so that has taken care of those ones. And we also have those 4. We can't include that one because that actually is in the same plane as VW. So let me get rid of those. QU, TU, and ST. Remember, to be skew, it means to be not in the same plane, in lines that do not intersect. Okay, example 2 says find the different pairs of angles. So first one, AIA, those are alternate interior, so we have to be between our lines and on alternating sides. So we would say 3 and 5 would be one pair, and then on alternate sides you can see that 4 and 6. Sometimes I say that it looks like they form an S. CIAs, those are consecutive interior. That means they're inside the parallel lines, consecutive on the same side. So on the same side we're looking at 3 and 6. And also on the other side, the 4 and 5. C says alternate exterior, so that's outside and on the alternating sides of the transversal, so 2 and 7. And the other pair is 1 and 8. Okay, CA, those are your corresponding angles. Those are angles that occupy the same position on the same side. So like 2 and 5. We can say 4 and 8. There's 2 more pairs. We can say 1 and 6. And the last pair would be 3 and 7. Okay, we move on to LP. Those are your linear pair. Linear pair are angles that form a line and they're adjacent. So we're talking about 2 and 4. 1 and 2. Those are adjacent and they form a line. 1 and 3 are adjacent and form a line. 3 and 4 are adjacent and form a line. Then we can move down to the bottom. We have 5 and 6. 5 and 8. 6 and 7. And then last 7 and 8. Okay, our vertical angles are the ones that form an X. So we're talking like 2 and 3. We can do 1 and 4. And down on the bottom we've got a 5 and 7. And then last 6 and 8. Okay, example 3 says identify the transversal that forms the pair of angles and identify and name the angles. So we're first looking at 2 and 12. Okay, they are on alternate sides of A, so that means A is our transversal. And they're on alternate, so we know it's an A, alternate, and they're inside our line, so interior angles. Our next one is angle 6 and 18. Okay, they're on the same side of this, so that makes D our transversal, and because they're on the same side, they're either both inside or they're both in the same position. And we can see they're in the same position. Those are known as corresponding angles. 13 and 19. And they're on alternate sides of this one, so B is our transversal. Alternate sides would be A, and they're outside our 2 lines, so we would say alternate exterior angles. The last one is 11 and 17. Nope, sorry, 11 and 7. Okay, they're on the same side of this one, so we would say C is the transversal. On the same side, it looks like they're between our 2 lines, so because they're between, we call those consecutive interior angles. Alright, that should help you with your 8-1 transversals and angle pairs. There is a lot of vocabulary in this section, so make sure you go over that vocabulary. Good luck.